Welcome back, Spokane Talks Live. And it was funny because we had Robin Haynes, otherwise known as Hayes, in the Spokesman Review, but we've corrected that since, on last week about firing people and how you can do it and not do it. And today I've got Crago?
Yes.
Right. Am I saying that right?
That's right.
All right. And Ryan McNeice, you have something to do with McNeice Wheeler.
That's right.
You're the Wheeler, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Exactly.
And today,
McWheeler sometimes.
McWheeler.
Yeah.
What we're going to talk about now, which I think is really interesting, and it applies to what the question I raised with you at some point too, is where can you go from hiring people as employees versus the independent contractor, and I clearly understand why the independent contractor, there's an advantage because a very small company like ours dealing with a couple of part-time people, the bookkeeping and everything else for the withholding and all of that just is more paperwork and more involved than I'd like it to be. Okay.
And Kent, the reason that, I mean, you obviously personally were asking that question for your entity. Chris and I see this a lot in our practice, business litigation and transactional work. The idea of the employee, W-2 wage earner versus a 1099 independent contractor is asked weekly, daily. We see it all the time, and it's a real hot button in the state of Washington and otherwise, as you see in federal and state cases that are going on across the country. So we ourselves get involved in the consultation as well as litigation on that quite a bit.
Why more involved in a brighter profile, if you will, here in the state of Washington?
I don't know that it's a brighter profile here in the state of Washington specifically, but Chris and I were speaking about this before the show today, that different agencies treat the independent contractor test and or analysis differently. For instance, the statute in the state of Washington is RCW 5004140. That's a three-prong facts and circumstances type test. The three prongs are: how much direction and control does an employer have over the end result of the employee, or how the work
that's
is
easy
done?
because I have no control over any of my people.
That's right. That particular question is hotly debated, the control feature. Second prong is the work or the type of work outside the usual course of business or outside the place of business of the employer? And we could break that down, but today we're on a fairly shortened timeline, so we'll get to that. But prong three is, does the worker, the employee or independent contractor, have an independently established business? There's where the facts and circumstances come in as to what do those prongs mean. And as Chris and I were discussing today, this is a test that Employment Security and Labor and Industries would use, but Chris can speak to the IRS having a different.
IRS may have you may have someone who qualifies as an independent contractor for the IRS, but doesn't qualify as an independent contractor for Labor and Industries, or may qualify as an independent contractor for wage and hour laws, but may not qualify under the Department of Labor. So it's wrought with landmines.
Absolutely.
And it really
good for business, for attorneys.
It
is. It is.
You know what I mean? Because you got to ask for legal advice, or you pay for it later.
Well, and it's a big issue because a lot of people will find out that, hey, I can just hire these people as independent contractors and I really don't have to do anything for payroll purposes, but they don't find out that that's not the case until the Department of Labor or the Labor and Industries starts knocking on the door, and by then any benefit that you may have reaped, you're going to
pay back with penalties
and interest, and the burden, the tax liability with that is substantially more than what you ever would have saved.
Well, 4 years later, like Chris is saying, you could feel like, we went to a 1099 structure, we didn't have the paperwork, we didn't have the payroll issues, didn't have to bring accountants in. All of a sudden an audit comes and $50,000 in unpaid employment security and or L&I. All of a sudden you're into the litigation issue as to what the facts and circumstances of the characterization of that employee's work was. That's where the litigation is.
So what you're telling me is it's very difficult.
It's complex. It really is, because something that seems like on its face, well, that certainly seems like an independent contractor, is not necessarily so.
Yeah, and we've seen during the recession a lot of people who lost their jobs and so forth that this is how they've received revenue and income, is to go out and I'll contract with you for 10 hours a week and do these kinds of things, and you over here for another 10 hours, and all of a sudden I'm up to maybe 30 hours doing those kinds of things, and I've at least got some income coming in.
Kent, you're actually hitting on prong 3, which is a really important piece of it. You just described that this
that person has multiple.
They have, if they weren't employed by you.
Okay.
Would they have other options tomorrow, the next day, or by and large, if you looked at the facts and circumstances, am I working for you 30 days in a row and I'm not in an independent trade?
Okay.
So your example actually is a good one, that in our economy in the last 10, 15 years, you're seeing a lot of movement between.
I've got friends who have done that.
I'm working for you for a week. I'm working for this individual for a week. That fits the prong that you have multiple.
Okay, so that is a better position.
Absolutely.
That puts you on one step.
Yep.
Okay.
But it's all the steps together. So if you contracted with someone else to do, payroll services for one business, and the rest of the week you worked for a fast food business.
Okay.
You could be considered an independent contractor on the payroll services, but you would probably be a part-time employee for the fast food service.
Sure.
You have to look at the facts and circumstances, and you have to look at all of the tasks.
So you could be doing both.
Right. And there are, oftentimes the conversation is geared towards an employer, is framed that, well, an employer would definitely want to have independent contractors. Maybe the costs are less, the paperwork's less. Not necessarily true. With employees, you have the ability to create a cohesive workforce to accommodate the goals that you're trying to accomplish. Whereas independent contractors, I think as Chris was just saying, if you are one day working for this individual or working for this individual the next day or week, there's less cohesiveness and sometimes quality breaks down.
Right.
So it really is the ultimate cost-benefit analysis. But the employer really does need to be careful of looking at the complexities of those 3-prong and 8-prong tests.
Okay, go through the 3-prong. We talked about the third one here. In terms of if a person is working several of these jobs, that makes it easier for them and for you as an employer to qualify that they're not just depending on you.
So one of the prongs is direction and control. So let's go back to the example of doing payroll services for a business. As long as the business says, hey, we want you to come in and provide these payroll services. We don't care when you do them. We don't care where you do them or how you do them.
Just get them done.
Want them to get done.
Direction and control over the methods.
Get
it done.
That's a good clarification. I can still put on a time limit. Like
absolutely.
For payroll, for your bookkeeping or something, I'd like it done every quarter or something like that.
And that's
still reasonable.
An individual needs to be able to control an outcome. Otherwise, you can see where that would go, the inefficiency of the contract. But Chris is right. The control piece is probably one of the most critical.
Okay. And the other prong is?
The other prong is outside the usual course of business. So you are a barbecue restaurant and you hire someone to come in and provide payroll services. They're not coming to provide
to serve food
the
or
underlying
to cook.
service that you provide.
Okay.
That's a tricky one, because most folks think, well, the independent contractor I'm having come in does do what I do. That's a bit of the hitch in the logic that leads you to be closer to potentially an employee.
Wow.
For characterization purposes.
Now I see why we talk to you folks.
That's right.
Yeah.
Because and you can ask us the questions that can then say, well, Kent, if you go this direction, you're opening yourself up to the potential of being audited and so forth. Or it appears that everything else being equal, that you and your employee, contracted person, meet the requirements.
That's right.
And you feel fairly confident that we've set up the contract, whatever else. And is that part of it too, setting up a contract?
Absolutely. And that's a great segue into, once you've made the determination, cost benefit analysis, or characterization wise that you're going to treat, the employer is going to treat the worker as an independent contractor. The paperwork piece. That the person might very well be, by facts and circumstances, an independent contractor, but oftentimes,
get it in writing.
Well, oftentimes we come into litigation and there's not a paper trail of, does the person have their own Secretary of State filing, their own UBI number, their own EIN number, their own bank account,
and that would be required, really.
Well, yeah, and
it's proof.
People
that they're independent.
People might say, well, they told me they
Yep.
were a separate business, or they told me this. Well, what we actually do is, you come in, you tell us the situation and the circumstances. We ask you the questions that help manage your level of risk. So at the end of the day, through this entire process, we can tell you, okay, your risk is going to be lower. Or in this situation, it's going to be higher.
And here's how to document that risk. Yeah. It's an interesting topic.
Yeah, it is.
Honestly, we could talk about that one.
And I know there's been the clampdown federally and statewide, and
Uber, FedEx cases.
All of that to, because the government wants their money.
Right.
And they'd rather have the employer collect it.
And
that's really what we're talking about in a lot of ways. Yeah.
That's
So, okay. Craig,
thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Ken.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Chris. I called you Craig.
That's okay.
Chris,
Chris
thank you.
Crago.
Chris
Crago. Okay, well, I was close.
Yeah,
Okay, and
yeah,
Ryan,
okay.
thank you very much. And we do need to talk.
All right.
Okay.
All right. Thanks for having
All
us.
right, thanks.
Good to have you all, as always. And how do people reach you?
They can definitely go to our website at McNeiceWheeler.com or call us at 928-4141.
All right. Did I see somewhere that you're looking at moving?
We've looked at a couple different options. Our main office is in the Spokane Valley, but we're looking at some U-District space as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
We're moving up in the world.
That's right.
Yeah, check the
Yeah.
billing, guys.
Yeah,
No, I'm just
yeah,
kidding.
yeah.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Very informative. Very
Appreciate it.
informative.
All right,
We're going to
thanks.
take a quick break, and Pia Hallenberg will be here to talk about what's going on in the Spokane Valley, including a couple new council members.
You gotta eat. You gotta watch.